My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es. This is the Spanish Digital Nomad Visa 2025 free webinar. A little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for for English-speaking foreigners who want to move to Spain since 2014. And we have wonderful reviews out there that you can check on Trustpilot and Google. Actually, on Trustpilot, we have 166. I need to update that. And the way you can use Spainguru, you can use it for absolutely free. I have so many tools that you can sign up for and opt out if you wish. For example, weekly newsletter that I send every single Monday, featuring the top discussions, most watched video, and so much more. YouTube channel with almost 1,000 videos uploaded. Blog post with more than 1,800 articles and a vibrant community of Facebook groups and subreddits with an aggregated total of 150,000 members, from which the most relevant group is the dedicated Spanish Digital Nomad Visa Facebook group with now 17,000 members that I highly recommend you joining, because there are people sharing their first-hand experiences, their doubts, their questions. It's so updated. You receive the fresh news right there, and you can participate and you can ask your questions on an anonymous basis. If you want to keep your identity not undisclosed, you can also do it. So it's very, very good. And of course, if you need to use professional services, I have personally vetted several professionals. Many of them I have used them personally. I highly recommend you at least engaging with immigration experts and tax advisors. At the very least, at least consult with them 1 hour each before even taking the decision of coming to Spain, so you know your possibilities, your visa eligibility, your taxes, implications if you move to Spain. So at least those two things need to be aligned correctly so that you understand which long-term strategy you will take. And then you also can find other services like financial planning. And if you're applying for the visa, you will probably need visa-compliant health insurance, medical certificates, foreign translations, apostille services in the UK and the US, opening bank accounts, money transfer services, and many more services like property rentals, and even mortgages for foreigners who wish to buy properties in Spain. I have more than 100 better services on Spainguru that you can find. So I highly recommend you just spending a few minutes on Spainguru.es and looking if there is anything interesting for you. Now, the webinar objectives. I hope that by the end of this webinar, you'll understand the key changes of the Digital Nomad Visa in 2025. Look, we're going to go through a step-by-step description of the requirements and how to meet them, the documentation you will need and how to prepare that documentation, and the timeframes, what tax and social security contributions will apply, how the renewal process works, and what has changed since last year, and how to avoid, hopefully, common mistakes and delays. Okay, so this is how I have structured this webinar. It's like a timeline. First, we start with the terminology, then the update, then we're going to go deep into the formalities, application checklist, then we're going to have some tax considerations and social security, and then we're going to go for the visa renewal. Okay, now this is about the terminology. And here, first of all, we're going to mention UGE, which is Unidad de Grandes Empresas, which is the government unit that processes digital nomad visa applications in Spain. Okay, you can also apply from outside of Spain, but this particular visa has this particularity that you can also apply from within Spain. You do it online, but you have to be in Spain. Okay, and then we have apostille. What is an apostille? It's an international certification that legalizes documents that were not issued by Spanish authorities. So when you submit these documents to Spanish authorities, it needs a legalization so that Spain recognizes these documents as valid. Okay, for example, criminal records, company certificates, birth certificates, marriage certificates would need apostilles. Then what is a sworn translator? Traductor jurado. A sworn translator, different from just a normal translator, is a translator that was appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They have a unique registration number. They can their translations are recognized by all Spanish institutions, including consulates and UGE, of course. And you can do the translation fully online. Okay, you just send the PDF, you receive the sworn translation as a PDF, you print it out and you submit that documentation, or you upload it if you're applying from within Spain. Now, the A1 certificate is a certificate that shows that you're paying into your home country's social security. This is typically from the United Kingdom, okay, or from the USA. It would be the certificate of coverage, or COC, okay, which is something that you need to submit if you're applying as an employee and your company doesn't have a company in Spain. Then autónomo is the contractor figure, the 1099 in the USA, but in Spain it's called autónomo, okay? So this is the legal status for self-employed individuals in Spain, all right? Certificate of coverage we already mentioned is the same as the A1. Padrón empadronamiento is when you move to a Spanish city and you need to obtain a certificate of proof of address, which, for example, when you are going to go and get your residency card, most of Spanish police stations will require you to show some sort of proof of address, and the best proof of address is the empadronamiento. So when you move to a city, you rent a home, for example, and you bring the rental contract and the data of the landlord, you go to the city hall and you obtain a certificate saying you are living formally in this place. The tier card is the residency card, it's the plastic card. You need to submit, your fingerprints, go to the police station or foreign office, and bring your passport and your visa approval, etc. And then you will obtain a plastic card with your face, and that will be the residency card, which proves your residency status in Spain. So that is about the terminology. Okay, now let's go with the new stuff, with the fresh stuff, 2025 update. So some good news, first of all, is that W2 employees from the States are now DNV eligible. So the Spanish Immigration Office, the UGE, now accepts the certificates of coverage listing Spanish home addresses, which is a game changer for US W2 digital nomads, right? Before, the certificate of coverage from the States wasn't accepted. So therefore, the normal way for Americans or people working in the US to apply for the digital nomad was to turn into a 1099 or contractor, therefore, leaving some of the advantages of moving to Spain as an employee, for example, potentially being eligible for the Beckham law or a special tax regime that has some good perks, like flat rate, 24% tax rate, and some other things, some other advantages as well, right? So who qualifies for the certificate of coverage? W2 employees of the US companies working remotely from Spain up to 5 years and must apply via their employer with US company details, and you need to submit proof of remote arrangement, okay? So COC, the certificate of coverage, will help avoid Spanish Social Security contributions because your company in the States is going to be paying the Social Security in the States. Who may not qualify? Self-employed and S-Corp owners often don't meet the Social Security's US-based business criteria, and also people who are owning more than 25% of a company can trigger legal and tax issues in Spain. Therefore, always go for legal advisors, right? By the way, I don't think I read the disclaimer of this webinar. It's important to understand that I'm not an immigration lawyer, I'm not a tax advisor, and this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not legal or financial advice. So be careful, always engage, always consult with immigration and legal and tax advisors if you plan to move to Spain, since this webinar is just for information purposes only. Having said that, let's continue. How to get a US certificate of coverage if you're coming from the US. These are the different steps. Basically, first, you will gather the required info, you will submit your application, you can do it online or mail it, and you will wait for the processing. Be careful because all these time frames, you need to account for before. Maybe if you're applying from Spain, you have to have all your documentation ready before you travel, and it takes several weeks, sometimes months, for example, for the A1 in the UK. So you receive and verify your COC and confirm that everything is fine, and then you will add it to your application. So I have an article about this. In case you need it, you can always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, and I will send you the links to the different informations that may be interesting for your specific case. Let's continue with the major changes to the visa in 2025. So first of all, more documents now require apostilles, especially company certificates. There are stricter checks for business owners to prove real company activity, and professional experience must be backed by official evidence. Okay. We mentioned before the Beckham law, a special tax regime that grants a 24% flat rate for eligible individuals. Remember that 99% of cases is employees working for a non-Spanish company who move to Spain, and not for contractors. All right. So sometimes, at the beginning of this visa, many people were sold on the possibility of moving as a contractor with the digital nomad visa, and they were only going to pay 24% flat rate. That wasn't the case for everybody. You need to be eligible for this special tax regime. Then UGE decisions can be inconsistent, so be prepared to adapt. It can be quite frustrating. Although many people, when people ask, is it better to apply from a Spanish consulate abroad or from within Spain? Everyone will tell you that it's much better to do it, at least from a paperwork process perspective, applying from Spain, because the UGE is one single organism and they have a more streamlined process compared to the consulates. Having said that, it is still quite inconsistent and it can be quite erratic. Actually, there has been people that has applied, been denied, resubmitted everything without changing a single comma, and then got their visa granted. This has happened. Okay, so this is something that you have to have in mind and prepare for. Renewals are now treated nearly the same as new applications, so don't relax. When you have to apply for a renewal of your visa, you will have to gather documentation, you have to be extremely meticulous, and hopefully use legal advice as well, because it can be quite complicated as well. Let's talk about apostilles and legalization. What's required now in 2025? So before, only a few documents needed apostilles. We mentioned this, but now it's different. First, company registration certificates must be apostilled, okay, by the authorities that issued them. Tax or social security reports used as work proof require apostille. Marriage, birth, and civil partnership certificates, if applicable, need apostille as well. Okay, so you know that unmarried couples can also apply. So you have different levels of consideration for unmarried couples. Civil partnership certificate is absolutely valid with Spanish authorities, but of course it needs to be apostille. And we're not talking about this specifically, but also they need to be sworn translated. Documents from outside Spain must be legalized and apostilled under the Hague Convention. Okay, so generally, the documents that are official documents by authorities that are not Spanish authorities need to be apostilled. Okay, you can't apostille, for example, bank statements, right? Because it's not an authority; it's a company, right? So translations must be official. Okay, everything that is not in Spanish, okay, anything official that is not in Spanish needs to be translated. Okay, some things require sworn translation. As we mentioned, sworn translators are different. Some others need just normal translation from ChatGPT, Google, etc. Right? So very important that you check your requirements for your country early if you're applying from a consulate inside the consulate, and also consider that processing times will vary. Just a quick moment. Over 60% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. That's a lot of people getting value without hitting that button. 60% of you. If my videos have helped you understand Spain's immigration process, visas, or life here even just once, please subscribe now. I'm working hard to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2025, and your click truly makes a difference. Thanks so much. Now, let's keep going. Imran, I see. So basically everything needs apostles. Not everything. There is a checklist there, and you have to check what needs apostles. Okay. As I said, for example, bank statements will not need apostles because they cannot be apostles because they haven't been issued by a governmental authority. Okay. So extra scrutiny for business owners. Expect more questions and documentation if you're a business owner. Right? Authorities will now require proof your company is active and legitimate. A lot of people were maybe buying companies off the shelf, okay, that were a little like zombie companies without real activity, okay, just to comply with the 1 year of previous existence before applying. And this is something that the Spanish authorities want to make sure that you're not doing. Off-the-shelf or inactive companies are likely to be rejected, as I just mentioned. You may need to submit company tax returns, invoices and contracts, proof of business expenses or investment, evidence of clients and services delivered. And if your company has your name or is family-owned, the scrutiny increases, okay? So more vetting there. So for small and self-employed companies, provide proof of ownership, activity and client relationships, and extra documentation is expected by the Spanish authorities. Something to have in mind if you're a business owner. Now, about proving work experience, and we're still in the updates of 2025, okay? Then we're going to go with the formalities, like the general formalities of applying for this digital nomad visa. If you want to qualify without a degree, you must show at least 3 years of relevant professional experience. So either you apply with a degree or either you apply with relevant experience. And here's what's expected, okay? For work experience, a detailed letter from former employees or clients where you outline your role, responsibilities, and dates. So this is also important. When you create your file for submission, everything needs to match. Okay, your name, your dates, everything has to be a well-designed package where there are no gaps or anything that it mismatches. Official proof is now required, such as social security records. This is not for every type of applicant, okay? As I said, I'm not an immigration lawyer. I'm not applying on anyone's behalf. I recommend experts who are deep experts on digital nomad visa, but I'm not applying myself. Okay, so this is based in community comments and also on interviews with lawyers that I had. So it's not that this documentation is essential for everyone in any case, okay? But for some cases, it depends. If you're applying as an employee or as a contractor, in some cases, this could be relevant to know. So for official proof for work experience, social security records like in the UK, HMRC, or in the US, social security 750, Or when you don't have that, because it's impossible, because it takes too long, whatever, a detailed report from your current or past companies, or your contracts as 1099s, okay? Then also you can show tax documents, like, for example, the 1099s, the P60s in the UK, and self-employed employment pages. Invoices, bank statements tied to your freelance work as well. And all supporting documents must match your CV, okay, your curriculum. And for example, Imran, you were saying everything needs apostille. Well, your CV can't have an apostille, and it doesn't need a sworn translation. It's fine with just a simple translation, okay? And it must match also your current job role, okay? Experience must now be backed by official government documents, ideally Social Security, work-life history, or professional certificates from competent authorities. If not possible, provide a detailed employer report. All this, always check it with a experienced immigration expert, okay? There's so many tricks, and there's so many things that are influenced by your specific situation. Now let's talk about taxes. What expats really pay, okay? There's a lot, and I mentioned before, there was a lot of confusion. A lot of people were sold that as a digital nomad visa, you were going to pay 24% flat tax rate, but the truth is that this special tax regime only applies for employees and not for contractors. And most digital nomads move to Spain as a 1099 or contractor or autonomous, okay? So if you're an employee, you have this advantage, okay? There are other requirements in order to be eligible for the Beckham law. For example, you shouldn't have been living in Spain for the previous 5 years, okay? So this is all things that also need to be evaluated by a tax expert, okay, from your situation, right? So the Beckham law only applies to employees. And also something to have in mind is that you need to be making at least 55 to 60,000 euros of taxable income annually, at the very least, because there is extra administrative burden. There are allowances that don't count, deductions that don't count, for example, your family, etc. And if you're making less than this amount of money, it makes more sense to be under the ordinary regime or normal regime, okay? Because you're gonna get actually more allowances, etc. You're gonna pay the same or less taxes without the administrative burden, okay? This is something also that tax advisors recommend. And also it's been said also that Beckham law, it's for people working for a company that they do not own, okay? They will also look at that. Most applicants will pay standard progressive income tax rates, okay, that range from 19% to 47%, depending on how much money you are making. And if self-employed, you will also pay Social Security contributions, right? This is important because you will have to pay your Social Security contributions monthly, and you will have to declare as an autonomo income tax on a quarterly basis, VAT as well on a quarterly basis, and of course, you will also have to do the annual filings. Now, let's talk about what we mentioned, the unpredictable UGE decisions, what you should expect. So the UGE or Unidad de Grandes Empresas handles the digital nomad visa applications, but they're not always consistent. The requirements and interpretations can vary between cases, and rejections may happen even with strong applications. Appeals are usually time-consuming and not recommended. So what legal experts will tell you is that better to review what you submitted. If you were denied, just reapply again, don't appeal. Of course, this is always considering the time that you have left in the Schengen zone. You know that for most of the non-European passport holders have up to 90 days in a 180-day period to stay in Schengen. So you have to be legal at the time of application. Reapplying with clearer, reorganized documents often works better, and timing matters. Decisions around holidays may be stricter or rushed, okay? And this is something that we'll publish today. I interviewed Noelia Hernandez from Sterna Abogados. I asked her, is it true that foreign offices or grandes empresas or consulates don't work during the summer? And she says, no, it is a myth. They do work, but the truth is that many people take holidays, so they have less staff. Therefore, it can be a bit more erratic because of this going on. Now, let's go with the official requirements, okay? So we just saw the updates for 2025 and the fresh stuff, but now we're going to go with the formalities. And we're going to start with the core eligibility criteria for this visa, okay? So you must, first of all, financial requirements. The minimum threshold is earning at least 2,763 euros per month, and this is before taxes and expenses, so gross. Work remotely for a non-Spanish company or clients. Remember that you can have up to maximum 20% of your income coming from a Spanish company. And then or minimum 80% has to come from outside of Spain. Have either a university degree or at least 3 years of relevant professional experience. So we just mentioned some changes about the experience. You need to provide a clean criminal record for the past 5 years. So if you are living in different countries, you will have to obtain those criminal records as well. Prove your employer or clients have existed for at least 1 year, and confirm that your work is performed remotely using digital tools. So not every job counts. You need to prove that it is a digital work that you can do remotely. Now, we're going to go deeper into the income requirements for the applicants and families, right? So, different from other visas that are based on different indexes, the minimum financial threshold of the digital nomad visa is based on the Spanish minimum salary, or SME, for 2025. It can change any year. Right now it's 1,184 euros per month, but it is calculated on 14 payments, because some jobs, they have 14 payments, the 12 months plus Christmas and summer holidays, okay? That adds up to 16,576 euros per year, okay? Which, and the threshold is double that amount, okay? So you need to be making like 200% of 16,576 euros, which divided by 12 is, as we said, is 2,763 euros, okay? So the yearly income, the minimum yearly income is 33,152 euros, all right? So, and if you're applying with dependents, like a couple, or with children, for example, so a family of 3, 4, there you have the calculations. Basically, the couple will not be 200% of the, let's say, yearly minimum salary, but 75%, and then each dependent more will only be 25%. Okay, so there you have the absolute values that you need to have being making depending on who you're moving to or with. Income requirements for applicants and families. Amounts are gross, as we mentioned. If self-employed, income must be shown before deducting costs. Savings may help support your case, but cannot ever replace consistent income. All right, there's no rule here. It's a little bit rule of thumb by immigration experts, like at least 80%, 90% of the income must be done via your active remote work. And then maybe you can complete with savings, especially if you're moving with family. They're more open to accepting, let's say, a larger share of savings, but it is nowhere written on stone how that is. So you need to pay attention to what an experienced DNB applicant is doing, and a lawyer that works every day with this, and what is working for them. Income must be documented through contracts, payslips, invoices, and bank statements. And as we mentioned, a maximum of 20% of your income can come from Spain. And it doesn't have to come, it can be also 0% from Spain. Just the maximum is 20%, okay? But you can have 100% of your income coming from outside of Spain. Now, let's go through the application checklist and what you need to submit. To apply for this visa, you'll need, first, a signed letter from your employer or main client confirming your role, job title, job description, your pay in euros, remote work authorization from Spain, and confirmation of arrangement is long-term. Then your contract, ideally without fixed end date, because if it has a fixed date, if, for example, you show a 1-year contract and you're applying from Spain, then they're going to grant you a visa for just 1 year. But if your contract has not a fixed end date and you're applying from Spain, not from a consulate, you will get up to 3 years of teleworkers residence or digital nomad visa residence. Okay, so that's an important stuff. Last 3 months of stamped and or signed personal bank statements showing income. So this is the stamped part. There was a huge discussion yesterday on Spainguru's look at the digital nomad visa group about this, because some people say, look, I showed it without a wet ink stamp. Some lawyers said, no, it has to be stamped. But apparently only some people were saying that in their cases, only if you're applying as a contractor or 1099, those bank statements need to be stamped. Otherwise, if you're applying as an employee, they don't need to be stamped. So yeah, be careful with that, and always refer to an expert in DNB. Last 3 months of payslips or invoices, company certificate with the Apostilles now, proving your employer or client has existed for at least 1 year, proof of qualifications, okay, in case you don't, if you're applying with a university degree, or 3+ years of relevant experience, criminal background check from all the countries where you live in the past 5 years, and signed declaration, private health insurance in some cases, okay, not everyone is required of having a private health insurance, a compliant health insurance, but I have a special slide for that, because if you're thinking about staying for the long term in Spain, you have to have a private health insurance at least during the first year, and I will explain you why later on. Then passport, application form, payment receipt, and photo. Each document must be sworn translated or simple translation, and apostilled or legalized if required. Okay, so always check the legal requirements. So if you're applying for this visa as an employee, W-2, and via a certificate of coverage or A1 certificate, now we're going to talk about this special case. Okay, your employer must confirm your remote status and your job duties. So you need to ask a lot of things from your employer. Okay, and your employer needs to do part of the process. Okay, and in order to obtain the certificate of coverage or A1 certificate. W-2 form can support your income, but it's not enough by itself. You may need an A1 certificate or a certificate of coverage to prove that you are paying Social Security in your home country. Especially important for applicants from countries with bilateral agreements. Okay, so there are, Spain has bilateral agreements with Canada, USA, UK, and many countries about Social Security payments, but they don't always really apply them, at least for the sake of this visa submission. So without A1 coverage or certificate of coverage, Spain may require your employer to register for Spanish Social Security. That's another option, right? So you don't have a certificate of coverage, your company can come to Spain and open a Spanish company, all right? And they start paying Spanish Social Security to you, but that's a bit expensive, and no one actually wants to do that. But some people have their companies already present in Spain, and this is also quite common. Then a signed letter confirming no impact on Spain's labor market is also helpful. Okay, it's not a requirement, but some lawyers mention it. Okay. Now, also another thing. For example, this is a UK focus. We're talking about the people who move from the UK to Spain using an A1 certificate, okay, versus moving as a self-employed autonomous, right? These are things that also help you understand that actually you need to go through with your legal advisor in order to design the right strategy for your specific situation. First of all, if you're applying as an employee, the eligibility, you must have an A1 certificate. If you're applying as a self-employed, you don't need that because you will register as a self-employed in Spain, okay? But you should be able to prove that you were registered as a self-employed for at least 3+ months in your country of origin, at the very least. The timeline to apply, this is important. If you're applying with an A1 certificate, allow some time because your employer needs to start the process. That will take about a month, and then you will finish the process. That will will finish after 4 to 5 months. So it will take you 5 to 6 months to obtain your A1 certificate. So if you're planning if you woke up today and say, like, I'm going to go to Spain, I'm going to apply for a digital nomad visa, and you don't have any papers ready, be careful. You need to plan in advance because all these things take time, right? So the time to apply as a self-employed, as we said, you need to be working as a self-employed in your country, and after 3 months, you can apply in Spain as a self-employed, all right? And the employer requirements, if you're applying with an A1 as an employee, okay? Or, as we said, register the company, okay, the foreign company in Spain to pay Spanish Social Security. Or as a contractor, you don't need the employer to do anything of this, right? So the visa duration, as we said, if you apply as an employee with an A1 certificate that is typically valid for 2 years, they will grant you the visa for 2 years. And you have to have a strategy of what, if you plan to stay in Spain, how to modify your visa or how to renew it so that there are no gaps in your residency status in Spain if you plan to stay for the long term in Spain. Now, if you're applying as a self-employed, the visa duration is up to 3 years on first approval, provided that the contract that you are supplying has no end date and you're applying from Spain. Because if you're applying from a consulate, maximum they will give you 1 year regardless of your contract. Then taxes in Spain, it is simpler if you move to Spain as an employee, okay? You will have just an annual return, possible eligibility for the Beckham law. But if you apply as a contractor, you will have all those annual obligations, but also you will have to file quarterly tax returns, and you will not be eligible for a Beckham regime. I highly recommend you, if you apply as a contractor, as an autonomous in Spain, to have also a tax advisor or gestor or accountant, okay, that files your taxes. I am an autonomous here in Spain, and it's very, very complicated, even if you're a Spanish speaker. Even if you know about taxes quite a lot, just the filing is so complicated, in my opinion, and so many mistakes can happen. Now, focus on Social Security, being an employee versus self-employed. As an employee, you will be covered by the UK via the A1, okay? Or if the employer opens a company in Spain or has a company in Spain, will pay Social Security, which has a 32% base. Now, if you pay Social Security in Spain as a contractor or autonomous, the first year you will pay 87 euros per month. And then depending on the income that you made in the first year, they will regulate your contribution to about between 440 to 590 euros per month, which is the top tier. But since you are applying as a digital nomad, your minimum financial threshold sets you there as a Social Security. Now, if you move to Madrid or Andalusia, and I don't know if any other regions, there is a scheme in which you can claim back your what you paid in Social Security during the first month. They will pay you back that. Okay, so you will get back those 87 euros per month times 12. All right, but you need to apply for it, and it takes a few months to get it. Health insurance. If you move to, as an employee, you will likely need health insurance, private health insurance. All right, but if you apply as a contractor, you will promise that you will register as an autonomo. That will make you payer of Social Security, and you will be granted access to public health care. Therefore, as a contractor, you don't need to, for applying for the digital nomad visa, it is not a requirement to have a compliant health insurance. But I will talk about the real strategy if you plan to stay longer in Spain with the long-term residency. Now, administration burden as an employee, lower, okay, especially if the A1 is accepted, and if you're applying as a contractor, is higher. You need to file all those taxes. And yeah, basically those are the main differences if you apply as an employee or versus as a self-employed. And some of the things also apply if you're applying as a W-2 with your certificate of origin from the US. There are many things in common with this. Maybe the time frames are a bit different, but more or less it's the same comparison. Maybe I should add a slide for that as well. Now let's talk about the certificate of coverage, US, Canada, and other countries. If you want to avoid registering in Spain's social security system, a COC can help. US, United States, as we mentioned before, you request your social security coverage via the SSA 101 and 102 form, so that you can show that you remain covered by the US Social Security. In Canada, you request a certificate of coverage from Service Canada, and from the EU, EA, and the UK, you use an A1 certificate, okay? So because the UK was part of the European Union, they have the same scheme, the A1 certificate, right? The certificate must cover the full duration of your initial visa. If it expires, you may have to register as self-employed in Spain. So as I said, once if it expires, they will grant you the visa or the residency as long as you're covered by this Social Security. But then if it expires, be careful, you need to have strategies in place so that you don't lose a single day of residency in Spain, because if there are gaps, then also that time counts towards other types of visas if you plan to stay in Spain. So you have to develop a pathway that looks over that. And you have to make sure that it's apostilled and translated by a strong translator if needed, the Social Security certificate. Okay, so be careful with the timeframes because it takes time, takes several weeks. It's quite frustrating for many people, but if you plan accordingly, everything should be fine. Now, employers paying Social Security. Is this a viable option? So if you're applying as an employee without the A1, your company needs to register in Spain. Spanish authorities may require your employer to enroll in Spain's special regime for foreign companies that will allow them to pay into the Spanish Social Security system on your behalf. It's a complex and often costly process that many companies don't want to do, and most will prefer just change their status to contractors or consultants rather than direct Spanish payroll compliance, okay? So it's important that you talk with your employer, because if you plan to move as an employee, you will have to disclose these plans because your employer needs to do part of the process as well. Now, if you choose to go self-employed, how and when you register, right? As we mentioned, the advantage of applying as a contractor is more flexible because you don't need a Social Security certificate, right? But then you will have to become an autonomo in Spain and pay your taxes and pay your Social Security. Registering as autonomo in Spain means that you pay your Social Security, you will have to file your tax declaration quarterly and annually, income and VAT. Now, normally, if you are just working with overseas customers, you will not apply VAT to your invoices. So you will just have to file your VAT, but basically the result will be zero because in your invoices, you will not have Spanish VAT. Now, if you have Spanish customers, you will have to apply the VAT. Time matters. Don't register until you've entered Spain and your visa is approved. Okay, so in case there are different timings, if you're obtaining your visa from a consulate, you already enter Spain with a granted visa. Okay, it is a bit different. But if you enter Spain as a tourist and you're applying the following day, you shouldn't register as an autonomo until your visa is approved. You would have 30 days to complete the process after arrival. Okay, now that's if you enter Spain with your visa granted. You have 30 days, let's say, to register as autonomo, right? The law says that you have to register autonomo as soon as possible, and the authorities will look at this, okay? We said that you will have to pay for your Social Security contribution starting at 80 euros and going upwards during the second year, and always consider to have a gestor or accountant to do those filings, okay? This is important. Now, $1 question. Can a criminal record affect your application? Yes, it can, of course, okay? This is a mandatory part of the process, and it has to be clean, right? For every country where you live during the past 5 years, right? So it shouldn't be like this, but experts, immigration lawyers who are submitting documents and doing this every single day report that even minor offenses can trigger delays or rejections, and that Spanish authorities will look for serious criminal convictions. In this case, it's going to be a denial. They're going to be looking at fraud, drug-related offenses, repeated offenses as well. And but in some cases, older or minor infractions may be overlooked. People mention driving under the influence or smoking pot, more than 5 years ago. Stuff like that may be overlooked. And you will have to also sign a declaration confirming that there is no pending criminal charges, right? So that's also important. And of course, this certificate always needs to be apostilled and sworn translated where required. If you come from the States, your federal background check needs to be apostilled by a federal apostle. Okay, you can find recommended sworn translations on Spainguru.es and recommended apostille services in the UK and in the US. Now remember that after this presentation, we're going to go to a Q&A session. Now, if you have to leave earlier, don't forget to leave a review on Trustpilot. There on the green bar on the top, there's a red button there. And if you think that the information that I'm sharing with you today, if you're learning something new today from this webinar, please leave a review on Trustpilot. It really helps me out so much and also helps others find this content. Thank you so much. Now let's continue. Do you need a degree? Alternatives that work. So, a university degree is one way to qualify, but it's not the only path. Option 1, university diploma is in a relevant field, must be legalized and officially translated. Degrees must be graduate or postgraduate level from recognized institutions and related to your current job. Option 2, at least 3 years of professional experience, directly related to the remote work you will be doing in Spain, and supported with documents such as employer and client letters, as we mentioned before, with the new 2025 update, social security or tax reports, invoices, contracts, and proof of services delivered, right? Everything needs to be aligned. Everything needs to match. So it is important that you put this in order and you're meticulous. How to prove freelance or contract experience? If you're applying as a freelancer or contractor, proving your experience is key. Submit a detailed CV or curriculum, okay, aligned with your application, translated by simple translation. Include client letters confirming work history, scope, and timelines, and provide official documents such as social security records from your home country, tax filings. For example, some of the filings mentioned Schedule C, self-assessment pages, invoices and proof of payment, bank statements or receipts, okay? Organize the documents by client or year for clarity, okay? And consistency is important. The job you're doing now must be directly related to the experience that you are showing, okay? This is important. And everything, the more formal and verifiable your experience, the stronger your application, right? So this is also about strength. This is a strong application. This is not so strong. This is a weak application. You're basically gaining points, okay? Points of strength with the different documents that you provide. And, Spanish bureaucracy loves documentation, right? And they want to see that you're doing the effort of making the effort of providing the documentation, as close as possible to the required documentation so that everything matches and you make a strong case of your application. Let's take off this thing. How can I take it off? The preview, on air. The CTA bar, I don't know how to take it off. Can you bring your family? Rules of spouses and partners. Yes, and this is something that changed for the non-lucrative visa, but stayed the same for the digital nomad visa. Immediate family members can join your application as dependents. You can include a spouse or legally registered partner, children under 18, and also adult children, okay, and parents, right? A specific independent situation. So you need to show for adult children and parents that they are dependent financially from you. Okay, and they are not married. They are not married. They are the same family unit, right? So they depend totally on you. To include a partner or spouse, you must provide marriage or civil partnership certificate, apostille and sworn translated if not in Spanish, proof of shared finances or cohabitation if married and applying as stable partners. For unregistered couples, pareja de hecho or stable couples, so you have two figures, pareja de hecho or stable couples. So pareja de hecho is when you apply with a document that says you are an unmarried couple, but you are a legal partnership, right? Now, stable couples is like you don't have formal documentation, but you can prove that you're a couple, right? And for that, you will need to provide documents proving cohabitation for at least 1 year, okay? Such as lease agreements, joint bills, shared bank accounts, or if you haven't cohabitated for at least 1 year, children in common, right? And all the documentation you can have in order to prove that you are a couple, right? Remember that the financial threshold for this visa increases with dependents, okay? So 200% of SME, 75% of SME, the couples, and 25% of SME, SMI, for the children, for example, right? So bringing children, adult dependents, and elderly parents. This is what you need to know. Minor children, you will need a birth certificate, Apostilles translated, and proof of financial support. And school plans is helpful as well. This is also something that is reported by experts. If you're planning to bring adult children, that is 18 years plus, but under 26, must show full-time studies, financial dependence, proof of living with parents. It's also helpful to show certificate of single status. Okay, they haven't married, so they're part of the same family, and proof of not working. For example, showing Social Security certificates. And if you plan to bring adult children that are more than 18 but also over 26, this would be only allowed if they're medically incapably dependent and providing official incapacity documentation, right? Also, something mentioned is adopted children. You have to include a court ruling confirming legal guardianship or adoption of those children. Now, going to parents or in-laws, parents must prove real stable financial or physical dependence, such as full support via bank transfers or medical dependency. Cases are assessed individually. Then you need to show that you're sending money, that you're paying things for these parents or in-laws, okay? And often requires a notarized declaration and additional income, okay? This is, of course, you need to show additional income for every single member that you want to add to your application. Bringing children, adult dependents, and elderly parents, we continue. For later applications, for example, if family members apply later, so you go to Spain, you apply for your visa, okay, but you are the only main applicant, but you wish to bring your family and add them to the file, so extra documentation is required. For example, if you're applying as a self-employed applicant, you must be fully registered as an autonomo before they can apply, and this can take time. So something to have in mind in your plans and comment with your legal advisor. Do I need private health insurance? All right, this is, I mentioned this before. Now we're going to go a little bit more in depth. Not everyone needs private health insurance for the sake of the digital Nomad visa application, but many do. For example, if you're covered by a valid A1 certificate of foreign social security, insurance is not required. If you register as self-employed in Spain, you are automatically covered by Spanish public healthcare. Automatically. This is not the case, in fact, okay? I mean, let's say, we're going to talk about this, okay? If you start paying Social Security, then you're automatically covered by Spanish public healthcare, okay? This is important. But we need to look at the timings. We're going to look at that in the next slide. If neither of these applies, then you will need a compliant private health insurance that has no copayments or deductibles, offers full coverage in Spain, and is valid for the entire duration of your visa. And at least it has to have 1 year, and you need to provide a certificate of coverage issued by the company, okay? And the company needs to be an approved company authorized to operate in Spain. The good news is that it's not as expensive as, for example, US health insurance. You get full coverage with much less premium. Now, okay, this is how I take it off. All right, fantastic. Do you need private health insurance? Let's continue. This is something important. This is a long-term strategy, and that's why I highly recommend you to consult with an immigration expert that knows their job, okay, and can tell you how to fulfill your plans in the long term, okay? Not only like, hey, I want to apply for digital nomad visa, period. No. When you sit down with the lawyer, you can tell the lawyer, look, I want to move to Spain, and potentially I want to stay in Spain many years. Who knows, right? I want to have my doors open, okay? My possibilities open. What can I do? What could be the best strategy for this? And then you arrive to the conclusion that the digital nomad visa is the best strategy. Maybe it's not. And then once it ends the validity of the visa, how are you going to do, right? So you need to set up the full strategy. This is where I'm going, that you need to go with experts that know their job, right? And this is an important consideration. And going back to the private health insurance need, remember, if you're aiming for the long-term residency in Spain after 5 years of legal residency, okay, it's crucial to have uninterrupted full health coverage without copays from day one. What is day one? Contractors 1099 or autonomous often face a gap between the visa approval, and the visa approval is day one, and the start of public healthcare. They will have a gap without the coverage, which could make you ineligible for the long-term residence later. After 5 years, well, you have this surprise, right? So to stay covered and compliant, I recommend getting private health insurance for at least your first year in Spain, okay? And this is important, that it has to be a compliant health insurance without copays, deductibles, full coverage from minute zero, okay, zero waiting times, etc., right? Then when you have gained access to public healthcare, you will be able to have uninterrupted compliant health insurance coverage. And if you wish, you stop paying your private health insurance and you continue with the public sector, but at least you didn't have your health insurance gap. Okay. And if you need one, I highly recommend you engaging with Carlos Blanco, my recommended exclusive Adelas agent, top company in Spain. And he's also an expert immigration lawyer, and he has certain flexibilities, like he can have start date extensions, which is not what you will be required or searching for if you're applying for the digital nomad, but he's a fantastic option for you because it is high value for money, and he's an immigration expert. He can also do your digital nomad visa application as well, not only my other recommended lawyers, but he's also an exclusive agent that will provide you with the best health insurance tailored to your needs. Now, essential extras, entry stamps, apostles, and translations. Let's talk about these details, okay, that can actually bring a lot of headaches to your application. Passport entry stamp, right? Now they're going to change the entry system, okay? It's going to be like a digital entry system, but until it doesn't appear, let's consider that it doesn't exist, okay? But because they're delaying it for several years, and why not? Now, passport entry stamp required if applying from within Spain, proof of legal entry, right? So it's important that if you're going to apply from Spain, you need to enter Spain and show when you enter Spain, so they know when they start counting the 90 days, okay, in your Schengen period, right? It's important that you have a valid entry into the Schengen area. This is something that I was also reading from someone from Dominican Republic that entered Spain, did have, I think it was Dominican Republic, but don't quote me on that. But the person entered Spain, had the Spanish stamps, but didn't have the Schengen visa. So some nationalities need a Schengen visa to enter the Schengen area. For example, Philippines. Okay, it's not the case with the US, UK, Canada, Australia, etc. But many nationalities. So be careful, because maybe if you're going to apply from Spain, you need to require your Schengen visa, and then enter as a tourist with your Schengen visa, and then apply for the digital nomad visa. Otherwise, you have to apply from your consulate of origin. That's why many Filipinos are applying from Manila consulates, right? Then another thing is, if you enter Spain via another Schengen country, you will not get a visa a stamp on your passport. Therefore, you have 72 hours to get a declaración de entrada, which is a one-page document. I just recently published an article on Spainguru.es, how to get it, print it out, you fill it, and you go to a police station in the airport, Spanish airport, or near the border, and they fill it up, they put a stamp, and that's your official entry date. Then apostilles, needed for official documents from abroad. We mentioned criminal records, birth certificates, company documents, marriage certificates, etc. Some translations, all non-Spanish documents might be translated at least, and some of them by a certified translator or sworn translator appointed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that you can find on Spainguru.es. Curriculum, CV, should match your documented experience and current job. I repeated this many times, but it has to be like that. So pay attention to that. Everything has to match. Everything has to be perfect. Application forms must be fully completed and signed. Any errors may cause delays and rejections. Topping up income with savings. Is it allowed? We mentioned a little bit about this. It can support your application, but they cannot substitute your regular income. The DNB is based on active, ongoing earnings. However, if you show substantial savings, may strengthen your case. If your income is slightly below the required threshold, slightly, okay? Some people say, 10% below maximum, right? You're bringing multiple dependents. You're self-employed with variable monthly income, with big ups and downs. Savings can replace the active income entirely, and bank documents must be stamped and signed, okay? And check with this about the wet ink stamp, because not everybody needs to provide this. But yeah, if you can, get them stamped, because, for example, banks in Spain, they stamp the documents, okay? Even if you download the PDF from their application, from their online application, you will get a PDF with an image of a stamp, right? And authorities love the stamp. And signed, right? So what counts as savings? Bank statements with your name, fixed term deposit and investment accounts, proof of consistent ownership and access. So it's important that they are liquid and readily available without penalties. Yeah. When you should register as autonomo? This is the legal tax timing. If you plan to be self-employed in Spain, it's important to understand when you register. So first, you do not register before arriving with your approved visa. Okay, so if you got your visa from abroad, you arrive and then you register as autonomo, right? And in this case, you will have 30 days after entering Spain to apply for your TIE, for a residency card, right? So you have your visa, and now your visa needs to be converted into a residency, okay? Because normally we talk about visa and residency in the same way, but the visa is actually the paper that goes on your passport that grants you entry into Spain for a certain period of time, from a window of time, and then will give you the right for a residency, okay? So you need to obtain the plastic card, the TA card, to show that you have the residency. But the residency is, the immigration status that, is longer in time, that is not linked to your passport, or let's say, basically that's the difference, right? So yeah. Or if you apply from Spain, that's coming back to the timings, immediately registering as an autónomo after receiving the visa granting from Spain. Only after that, you should register as autónomo, okay? Via the Spanish Social Security and the tax agency. It's different things, Social Security and the tax agency, right? Seguridad Social, or INSS, and IAT, okay, Agencia Tributaria. Now, why timing matters? Registering too early may disqualify your visa or affect your tax residency, and registering late can result in fines or loss of health coverage, right? The pros and cons of applying from Spain versus applying from a consulate. The pros: you don't need to wait in your home country. You can enter Spain as a tourist if you have Schengen visa or you don't require one, and apply once here. Faster appointment scheduling. You can apply for directly online through the UGE portal. No consulate delays. It's a more streamlined process, not fully streamlined, whereas consulate requirements interpretations vary. Okay, every consulate is different. There's greater control over your move. You settle housing, schools, logistics while awaiting approval. Easier family reunification later. Once you're approved, family members can join as dependents. And approval with an indefinite contract can grant you residency for up to 3 years versus one of applying from a consulate. Now, the cons from applying from Spain: there's a strict 90-day window. You must apply within those 90 days of arrival. Schengen rules. Entry proof required. Stamp passport or police registration needed for applicants. Declaración de entrada. Visa starts immediately. Your 1-year residency begins from approval date and not from a chosen start date. So when you apply from a consulate, you write when you want your visa to start, right? And maybe the consulate grants it in the future. Whereas the UGE is like, oh, you've been granted. Boom, started. And hopefully you have your private health insurance in place if you want to stay longer in Spain. Some risk is denied. No appeal process within Spain. No appeal process within Spain. There is appeal process, but it is recommended to reapply. Okay, and sometimes if your 90 days are gone, you need to leave the Schengen area and potentially reapply from your home country, or wait until there's time again with new documentation, with new valid documentation, in order to reapply from Spain. I have asked this in the DNB group from Spainguru in June 24th, and 19 people answered. How many of you apply from Spain versus your consulate? Nearly 80% from Spain, 20% from the consulate of origin, right? And this is a timeline in 5 different steps. First, prepare your documents, 1 to 3 months. Remember, if you're applying with a certificate of coverage from the UK, it can even take longer. Travel to Spain, submit your application via the UGE online portal. Someone can do for you, the legal representative, or if you're going to do it yourself, you need to get a digital certificate in order to sign digitally, okay, formally, your certificates and your application. So be careful with that. Some people try to obtain the digital certificate before arriving to Spain on a previous scouting trip or something like that, which be careful, has potentially tax implications to do that. But some people do that so that when they arrive and they do it themselves, they apply by themselves, they can apply the next day without having to wait for obtaining a digital certificate. That has a little procedure to obtain, right? Then you wait for resolution up to 20 days, something that is also typical from applying from Spain via the UGE, and then you receive your residency, okay? Remember that if no resolution is issued within 20 business days, an appeal may be filed under the administrative silence. This timeline applies when applying from within Spain through the Unidad de Grandes Empresas, okay? So basically, there is like a negative administrative silence after 20 business days, in which, like, formally, there is no decision, really. There is no decision. Maybe you receive it a bit later, okay, a few days later, but they give you the option to reappeal if you want. If you think that you're going to be denied, to reappeal immediately, okay, so you don't lose time. Working with individuals. What if the clients aren't companies? So not all digital nomads work with large businesses, and that's fine. You can apply even if your clients are individuals or sole traders. The key is to prove the relationship is stable, long-term, and remote. And for this, you need to include documentation like invoices with client names, proof of regular payments, written confirmation from the client about the work you do. And for multiple smaller clients, you have to show consistent income across several months. Avoid contracts that suggest you are doing work for Spanish-based individuals unless clearly allowed, okay? And always explain it if this is the case. Working for non-governmental organizations or NGOs. Contract with NGOs or foundations are acceptable if they operate like a company, showing consistent activity, legal status, and financial transactions. This is a new slide that I just added in this new version. Why the TIE appointments are hard to get and what to do. So TIE, the tarjeta de identidad extranjero or residency card, the plastic card with your face that proves your residency status in Spain, right? You need to obtain an appointment to go to a police station to get it, to put your fingerprints and show your documentation. So after arriving in Spain, you'll need to get your TIE, but many cities have a shortage of appointments. It's a huge bottleneck, especially now in Valencia. Lack of appointments doesn't stop your legal status, but it can delay access to services, okay? What can you do if you're in this situation? You need to check the appointment sites daily, especially early mornings. This is what people recommend. If you're part of the Spainguru's digital nomad visa community, people talk about that very often, depending on where they are. Have to be flexible with nearby towns or smaller cities within the same province. Use a relocation expert or gestor to book on your behalf. And this is a master tip, okay? Instead of applying for the TIE in another province, you potentially can do it in Madrid or Barcelona via the UGE, and I recently published an article on the how-to guide, step-by-step guide on how to do it, because they will not require an empadronamiento or city hall registration, okay? You can apply for your TIE in Madrid. They will not ask you for empadronamiento as of today. So you go, you take a train, you sleep in a hotel, next day you apply, you need to get an appointment, you apply for your TIE in Madrid, submit your documentation, but no empadronamiento, so you're not really living in Madrid. They don't care about that, and they will give you the TIE, okay? In urgent cases, you may be able to request a provisional certificate as well if you can support that case. Okay, so very important you start looking at appointments for your TIE as soon as you enter Spain. How to guide getting your TIE. Okay, this is a guide on how to get your TIE. This is a generic guide. It is not the article that I just mentioned about getting your TIE via the UGE in Madrid and Barcelona to avoid having to show an empadronamiento. Okay, for that, refer to Spainguru.es or send me an email to hello@spainguru.es and I will send you the link. Now let's talk about taxes and social security. Some considerations. We're inside 51 of 74. Now, social security costs. What will I pay year 1 versus year 2? As we said, the first 12 months, normally you pay between 80 to 90 euros per month. And sometimes you will get it back if you live in certain regions like Madrid and Andalusia. They will pay you back those 1,000 euros that you paid the previous year if you apply for the subsidy. In year 2, they will look at your income, they will increase the contributions, and they will go up to, from 230 to 300 euros, okay, for the lowest thresholds to 590 euros for the higher thresholds, okay? What includes the social security payments? Well, access to Spain's public healthcare system plus subsidized medicines. So when you go to the pharmacy, you need to buy medicines. They will have subsidized costs, retirement and disability coverage, and parental leave and sickness benefits, okay? So it's important that you include this in your budget. Now, a little bit so you understand the burden of becoming an autonomo in Spain, okay? So for example, if you're making 30K a year, the minimum threshold for the digital nomad visa, the total burden will be around 25%. If you're making 60K, 30%, and if you're making 100K, it's going to be 35 to 40%, okay? This is, of course, no tax advice. This is a general rounded numbers for information purposes only, so that you understand the effective tax rates and full burden, including social security, so that, some people, mistakenly think that you're going to pay like 50%, 55%, and it's not completely true. And of course, your individual circumstances have a very big impact on your tax situation. Next slide. Does registering as autonomous trigger tax residency? This is a gray area, actually. This is a gray area, but this is a case and an answer by an expert. So someone arrived in Spain in September 2024, applied for DNB in October, was approved in November, and registered as autonomous in December. This person arrived after July 2nd, spent less than 183 days during 2024, therefore wasn't a Spanish tax resident in Spain, right? So this person is like, how do I pay taxes? Do I have to pay taxes in 2024? What's the story? So, and this expert said, for tax questions, if you ask 10 different people, you get 10 answers. This is a particularly gray area, as you weren't resident until you got your TIE card, so you weren't even officially allowed to work, okay? So officially, until you have your TIE card, supposedly you cannot work. You're supposed to pay tax in the country where you are physically working, so strictly speaking, on any work performed since September. So this person was not a Spanish tax resident but then when this person arrived in Spain, had some invoices, did some work, and they should pay for their income and this is what some tax experts say, as a non-resident in 2024. Then this person becomes resident in 2025, okay, and will pay taxes on their income as a resident, okay? So this is the general answer, right? I'm not a tax advisor. It's important that you consult with the tax advisor so that you understand your specific circumstance, especially if you are in this situation that is not extremely clear what's the situation, the tax situation. Now let's talk about a little consideration about the Spanish tax progressive system. Okay, and I do have a Spanish tax webinar that I have every 2 weeks. Yesterday was the last one. You can watch the recording on Spainguru's YouTube channel. And now let's go to a little bit about Spanish tax, progressive tax system. So you have different brackets that range from 19% to 47%. Now, many people say like, oh, if I make 100K of taxable income, that falls into the bracket of 45%. Will I pay 45% tax? No, you don't pay that. Actually, you will pay an effective tax rate for 100K of around 36%, because you will start paying 19% tax for your first 12,450 euros that you make as an income, okay, without deductions. 24% of your tax for the next 7,500 euros, 30% for the next 15,000 euros. So you're actually going to pay like some sort of median or average, okay? So the effective tax rate will not be 45% for 100K taxable income, but actually closer to 36%, okay? And this is where I just answer you. Yes. And this is how you can visually see it, the tax that you're paying for the different brackets, okay? And actually I have calculated, also again, illustrative purposes, only ballpark figures, rounded numbers, just for you to understand, without deductions, without allowances. If you make 30K, you're gonna pay effective tax rate, income tax rate of 24%, for 40K, 26%, for 50K, 29%, for 60K, 30%, 70K, 32%, 100K, 36%. This is only income tax effective rate. We're not calculating here the social security or anything like that. Now, the taxes calendar for autonomous. Remember that if you move to Spain as an autonomous, you will have to file annual taxes and quarterly taxes, right? So there are some deadlines in which, for example, quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, you have to pay your income. You have to pay, let's say, a standard 20% for your income, right? Anyway, you're going to have to pay more effective tax rate in your annual declaration. So you would have to be like paying every quarter 20% of your income. So you have to declare all your income. And then when you do your annual declaration, maybe you will have to pay an effective tax rate of 30%. So you already paid 20%, then you will have to pay the remaining part. So let's say that the invoice in the annual declaration is not going to be as high because you already advanced those payments. You will also have to file VAT and potentially pay it, okay, if you charge your customers VAT. And again, you have to file your annual tax obligations. Then there is another obligation, which is not a tax, but it is let's say a disclosure form, a 720 form, which is where you disclose the net value of your overseas assets by December 31st and rights held abroad. For example, you have properties, you have bank accounts outside of Spain, and you group them into different categories, like like real estate, bank accounts, cryptocurrencies, also via the form 721. And if any of the categories is over 50,000 euros of value, you have to declare everything in it. For example, you have 10 bank accounts with 5,000 euros in each. The total amount is 50K. You have to declare every single account, and you have to provide documentation, etc., etc. And the tax authorities want to know how much money you have, overseas and everything, because when you become a Spanish tax resident, you pay income tax on your global income and potentially on the global net value of your global assets and rights held abroad and inside Spain, right? So that's important. And other tax declarations. So it's important that you have a tax advisor or gestor in Spanish, okay, or accountant that handles these filings, because trust me, you have to become a gestor in order to file your own taxes without mistakes. So you have to be very careful with that. And of course, on Spainguru.es, you can find gestores, or also tax softwares that have also the service of having gestores or accountants that you can talk with. You can have consultations, and they remind you of the deadlines and everything. You can find them on Spainguru.es. You have taxdown.es, ren.com. Both of them are recommended by Spainguru.es. And you have discount codes and freebies if you use Spainguru's link. Now, Social Security for autonomous, we said first year is lower, second year goes up with the income, okay? And what it includes, actually, this is duplicated. I need to remember to delete it. This is the second webinar of Digital Nomad Visa, so excuse me for this. But slide 60, I will take it off. But remember, there is Social Security, right? And how much will my net salary be? This is also something that many people ask themselves. If you apply with a minimum income threshold of 2,750 euros, after the first year, you will have to pay more or less 440 euros per month of Social Security. income tax 407, and you will take home 1,900 euros. Okay, so income tax 15% in this case because you are low in the threshold, and the total deduction will be 31%. So your gross, more or less, your gross salary in the 2,750 euros level, and the net salary will be the gross minus 31%, and you get 1,900 euros. And if you grow into 3,500, 33% total deduction, 4K, 34, 5K, 33, 7,500, 37%, and 10K, 39% total deduction. These are also for illustrative purposes, approximate calculations, so you know more or less how your numbers could be, okay? Remember, I have a Spanish tax webinar that you can join today. It's absolutely free. You get a recording like this webinar as well. All is free in Spainguru. Only if you use my vetted partners that will charge you. And of course, I get a small kickback if you choose them. But of course, you're in very good hands. Only 4.9, almost 100% 5-star reviews out there if you choose to work with any of my recommended partners. Now let's talk about the visa renewals. Visa duration renewal timeline. Your digital nomad visa is structured for long-term flexibility. So initial visa approval, if you apply from outside Spain, is 1 year, up to 1 year. But if you do it from Spain, up to 3 years, depending on the contract that you show. But after 3 years, you can renew for 2 more years, right, for this visa. The deadlines. When you apply for your TIE residency card, you need to do it within 30 days of arrival if you come into Spain with a granted visa. The renewal window will open 60 days before your TIE card expiration date happens, right? So 2 months before, and up to 90 days after expiration date. But no one recommends doing it during the after the expiration date. Always do it the very first day, 60 days before expiration date of your TIE card. Don't wait until the last minute. Delays in appointments and documents can put your status at risk. And once you reach 5 years of legal stay, you may apply for permanent residence, okay, known as permanent residence, technically long-term residence, but of course you need to comply with certain requirements like no gaps in health insurance coverage. And also for long-term residence, there is a maximum time that you can be outside of Spain in the previous 5 years, which is maximum 10 months outside of Spain, not Schengen or European, Spain, in the previous 5 years, okay? And those 10 months cannot be consecutive more than 6 months, okay? Now, for applying for the Spanish passport, there is a pathway for Spanish citizenship, and the digital nomad visa or residency counts towards the residency requirements for applying for the Spanish residency. Now, for most countries, there's a 10 years legal residence period before they can apply for Spanish citizenship, for example, US, UK, etc. But then there are some nationalities that can access a fast track period of only 2 years, okay? And that is Ibero-American nationals, other countries like Philippines, Andorra, Portugal, Guinea Equatorial, right? And other situations. There are other situations in which they can apply earlier in time via residency, okay, like asylum seekers, etc., refugees. But these are not common cases for people applying for digital nomad visas. So for 2 years, you can apply for Spanish citizenship, which is faster than the 5 years threshold for long-term residency for people who hold this passport. So this is especially interesting for people who hold dual citizenship. You know, maybe you're American and you are Puerto Rican, or you have Puerto Rican parents. That would be enough doing some paperwork in order to benefit from this fast residency. Or you have Mexican parents, or you have the Mexican passport as well, or you have you can benefit from this definitely. What's the difference when you renew your visa? Remember, now they're super strict. It's almost like reapplying. You must still meet all income, work, and legal requirements, and the renewals will require updated income proof for the past 6 to 12 months, updated criminal record certificate from Spain, proof of continued remote work and business activity, confirmation of Spanish address, and up-to-date empadronamiento. And if there are any changes, you were fired, you changed employer, etc., you need to formally inform UGE within 30 days of that happening. Okay, anything that could potentially change your status on your visa. Okay, so it's important. You have to be very meticulous and prepare for the renewal very, very well, because it's almost like applying for another visa. So don't leave it till the end. What's different when you renew versus applying initially? Okay, so common renewal issues: income drops below the required level, freelancers fail to show consistent activity, delays with paperwork or expired documents, new apostille requirements, gaps in health coverage. Okay, again, gaps in health coverage. When you need the health coverage, you have a gap. Be careful with that. Be very careful with that. Other things to consider: gaps in residency permit. This is also something that happens a lot if you don't have a long-term strategy thought in advance, thought for the moment in which your digital nomad visa residency ends. Okay, if you plan to apply for the long-term residency, you should have 5 years of continued legal residency in Spain. Not only comply with the minimum stay requirements, but also you have to have 5 years of continued legal residency in Spain, like formal residency in Spain. All right. And again, the minimum stay requirements, you cannot be out of Spain for more than 10 months in 5 years. And for the beneficiaries of the fast track, if you're going to apply after 2 years for the digital for the Spanish citizenship, you cannot be more than 90 days outside of Spain per year in those 2 years. So 90 days in 12 months and 90 days in 12 months. You cannot be outside of Spain more than that. This is a judge decision. It's not in any rule, but it is a fact that you will be your Spanish citizenship will be denied if you didn't comply with those minimum stay requirements. Some tips for the smooth renewal: keep documents organized for day one, income statements, invoices, client letters, social security payment records if self-employed. Monitor your income to ensure you meet the threshold every month. Update your padrón, municipal registration. Okay, we mentioned that. Set reminders to begin the renewal process at least 2 months before expiration of your TIE card. Gather documents 4 to 3 months before expiry. Okay, even earlier if you can. Get a new background check from Spain with no pending legal issues. Okay, so it's important that you do all this and you are very careful and meticulous about your application. What happens when your A1 certificate is expiring? If you relied on your A1, be careful because it will not last forever. Okay, they can cover up to 2 years. And when it expires, you will have basically 3 options. 1, apply for a renewal in your home country, not always granted. Switch to an autónomo and register with Spanish Social Security. Convince employer to register in Spanish Social Security, which will give you Beham law eligibility. Leave Spain temporarily, which may reset the clock. Consider immigration pathways such as arraigo, non-lucrative work permit. Okay, these are different pathways that an expert immigration lawyer can put on the table as options. Okay, for example, arraigo, you have to be, let's say, irregular when you apply, right? Even if you were regular or you were legal before applying, when you apply for arraigo, and now the arraigo period is only 2 years in Spain, even if you were legal, but you are illegal for 1 day and then you apply for arraigo. Okay, this is long story short. Okay, I recently published a couple of videos on Stern Abogado's YouTube video page about all the types of arraigo and the different pathways that people have if they want to pursue this this pathway. Key considerations: UGE renewal rejections have been based on expired A1 coverage, and Spain expects continuity. Have a plan ready before yours expires. So be careful with that. Plan ahead. Now remember that about Spainguru, you can use it for absolutely free. Spainguru.es, not com, yes. And you can register for the newsletter. You can opt out anytime. Every single week you get news about Spanish immigration, digital nomad visa, etc. YouTube channel with almost 1,000 videos, blog posts, almost 2,000 articles, and the Facebook groups and Reddit communities. Join the webinars. They are free. You get a free recording. Every webinar is updated with news, with new stuff. You know, I never repeat the same thing in front of the camera. Trust me. Of course, some things don't change, but I, let's say, do my homework so that I update every time. You will see that there are different versions of my presentations. Actually, if I go to the first slide, you can see in the bottom right corner, this is version 2.0. So I update the version so you can see that I updated, that I added slides or corrected slides or improved the information. Okay, so that is important. So join the webinars. Don't think that you heard everything if you watch one of my webinars. Okay, you need to be updated every time. And of course, use my partners if you think that you need professional advice. For this type of visa, people describe it as a minefield. For example, for the digital nomad visa, 50% do it themselves and 50% use legal help. But for the digital nomad visa, people use experts in more than 90% of cases because there's so many things that are continually changing. It's a pretty new visa. It's only from 2023, only 2 years, and things are changing. They're adapting this, on the way. So highly recommend you to engage at least with the immigration and tax advisors, and then the rest potentially is useful as well, like health insurance if you plan to stay for a long term. Now, stay in touch. My email is hello@spainguru.es, Facebook group, YouTube channel, newsletter. And remember that the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. Requirements listed here are not official, and please check the specific consulate or UGE requirements before applying. Now we're going to go to the Q&A session. And if you haven't done it yet, you have to leave earlier. You can leave a review on Trustpilot. That really, really helps me, makes me extremely happy, and makes me think of your visa application and wish you that you will get it granted for sure. I will be crossing my fingers and praying for that you get your visa granted if you leave a Trustpilot review out there. That really, really helps me, and it only takes you 5 seconds of your time. Now, let's gonna look at the questions here. I see that people were asking some questions along the way. Now, Is the minimum salary required for the Spanish digital nomad visa in gross salary or net in income? I answered that. It's gross salary, and it is not the minimum salary. The minimum salary required. Okay, so it's a tricky question. So the minimum income that you need to have is 200% of the Spanish minimum salary in 14 payments per year. Okay, we saw it was like about 33,000 and some more divided 12. So the minimum salary for the main applicant is over a little over 2,700 euros. Okay, and then for the couple is 75% or of the SMI in 14 payments and 25% for each of the dependents. Right. My net salary is lower from required, but my gross salary is higher. Yes, always your net salary will be lower. You will have to pay taxes. You have expenses and everything, but thank God it's gross salary, right? That we have to consider, right? Imagine that you live in a country where you pay 90% tax, so your salary you make 10K per year per month, okay, and you pay 90% salary is 1,000 euros that you only have left, but that's because you live in that jurisdiction, right? So you apply basically with your gross salary, right? Let's continue with the next one. I see here, Dan, if you have more than 1 degree, I need them all doing. It's a good question. This is if you have more than 1 degree. I mean, I don't know the answer to this question, but I don't know exactly the answer. The first time that I see this, always ask your immigration lawyer or expert in this visa about this. But remember that the degree needs to be related to the job that you're doing, right? So maybe that gives you a hint of what degree to choose. What I understand is that it's enough with a degree or with experience, right? So if you have 10 degrees, imagine that you don't have 2, you have 10 degrees. Do you have to do 10? I would assume that by presenting all the required documentation, everything, all the legalities, with a degree that is related to the job that you are performing, in which you are basing your application, then that would be enough. In my humble opinion, this is not legal advice. Any idea of how long it usually takes a Brit to get an A1 certificate? As we said, it takes about 1 month for the employer and 4 to 5 months for the employee. So 5 to 6 months in total. Is the minimum salary required for the Spanish digital nomad gross salary or net income? Okay, sorry, this I just showed it. All right, sorry. Oh no. And I think those were all the questions I have, at least here. All right, so I don't see any more questions here in the chat. I see some comments. If you earned, okay, here this one was missing the question mark, so I copy it and put it as a question mark so I can display it, but probably I don't know it. If you earned your money in tax-free zones like Saudi Arabia, UAE, but still on a company, how does one declare their money? I don't understand fully your question, but anyways, even if I understood it, I don't know the exact case of tax-free zones like Saudi Arabia and UAE. Highly recommend you going with recommended DNB experts that you can find on Spainguru. At least a consultation, where you make your top questions, and in 40 minutes they will answer you the questions of 30 questions in 40 minutes, and you get everything answered in one consultation. Or if you want to go with an expert for your application for the full process, I also highly recommend it because, as I said, it is not only a question of applying for the digital nomad visa, but what your strategy is for staying in the long term in Spain. And for that, an immigration lawyer is very helpful because there are different pathways, especially when your digital nomad visa ends. What you have prepared in advance for your transition. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. And for your patience. We went over half an hour from the initial presentation. I will upload this to YouTube. I really appreciate that you joined today. And as I said, you can always contact me on Spainguru and hello@spainguru.es, and at least I will point you in the right direction. Thank you so much. Stay in touch. Leave a review on Trustpilot if you think the information is useful. And I see you around. Take care and goodbye.